Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann, and this is Pookie. I'll turn so everyone can see her face. She's my sweet girl. This is her favorite position to be in, so she just crawled up here as soon as she saw me sitting, and she's pulling on my sweater. Anyway, we're gonna film like this because she's very sweet. So today I wanted to talk about two independent fantasy books that I've read recently. The first is Fabled Passages by Margaret Pinard, which in my personal accounting I've sort of lumped in with fantasy books, but it's really more speculative fiction. So if you're not into fantasy, Fabled Passages might still be your thing. It is mystical and weird and wonderful and endlessly creative. It's a short story collection, and all of the short stories have something in common with our world. Actually, I should say most of them. Most of them do. There's at least one where it's a human character who doesn't, and then we get some really creative stories, like one told from the point of view of spiders, of all things. So speculative fiction. So there's some time travel in a story that has that's a little bit reminiscent of Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. So a person who works in the theater community and wakes up one day to discover that he without any control of his own, goes back in time for undetermined periods of time. And it's because he has unfinished business. That was one of my favorite stories in the collection. I found it very compelling, and I found the writing really beautiful. And it was sort of believable. And that's one of the things that I enjoyed so much about this collection is all of the stories that were written from a human perspective were really believable in like a speculative fiction way, where it's like, of course I don't think that time travel actually happens, but the characters are such sort of regular people that it's like, you know, I don't know what goes on in the lives of other people. So I really enjoyed those aspects to the story. Yeah, so there's some time travel and some portal things going on. Just some lovely weirdness. And one of my other favorite stories was the one told from the spider's perspective. It was one of the shortest stories in the collection. And it was, and maybe this is me and my personal background as an entomologist, but that story, I read it, it was like 2 pages, and I was like, I need more, because even in just those couple of pages, like what Margaret had set up was just absolutely lovely and intriguing, and just sort of hinted that there was so much more that could be said. And that was true for all of her stories. I was a little bit worried about, you know, a speculative fiction short story collection. Like, how do you, when you're sort of dealing with the fantastical, how do you world build in such a short format? And I think she did a really excellent job. I mean, they were all teasers. And so I was very much left at the end of most of these short stories with like, I need the rest of the story. Like, I have questions, you know, like there's so many interesting things going on. So I recommend these stories. I mean, like any short story collection, it's like some of them I liked more than others. And that's true of me in any short story or poetry collection. Short stories are not really a format that I'm drawn to normally. So maybe I just don't have the experience of reading short stories, but that was definitely true of this collection as well, where it's like some of the stories, you know, sort of really hit me and felt compelling and believable, and some of the others fell a little bit flat, which is, you know, just short stories. On the whole, the collection is quite short, so definitely worth picking up and giving a try. I read this back in like December, but it's taken me a while to talk about it because I don't make videos too much anymore, sadly. So the other book that I want to talk about is independent fantasy that I read recently, or finished recently. Oh no, I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, well, I can't go back upstairs because now Pookie is back in my lap. So this is Blood of the Lily, which is book 1 of the Clash of Goddesses series by S.D. Huston. And I just read book 2 in January. So book 1, Blood of the Lily, I read last summer. Highly enjoyed it. Book 2, I enjoyed even more in January. Well, I'll just keep holding up this one. So these books delve pretty deeply into Irish mythology, and so they're just a retelling of some of the myths around those heroes and gods, and really creative. And then the Clash of Goddesses part is, oh, kitties, be nice. Okay, Pooh Bear came, and there was some drama. the Clash of Goddesses part is that, of course, Ireland underwent a lot of invasion and change over the past several hundred years. And so Clash of the Goddesses, the series is dealing with that conflict. And I find it so fascinating because S.C. Huston took a real period in time. You know, it's an invasion of Ireland that we know happened, and she's looking at it from this cosmic perspective, right? Of like what happens to these mythic figures in one place when a whole different set of mythic figures is invading along with their invading army. And so it's definitely fantasy, but it's so close to ideas about what happens when cultures collide and mix, and sort of that process of a religion and a culture overtaking or imposing themselves on another. And so she doesn't get into that explicitly, but it's all there sort of in the subtext, because you've got the goddesses clashing sort of on their own battlefield and in their own conflict. And it's not straightforward because, as we know from reading the mythologies of various countries, nothing is ever straightforward in the realms of the gods and goddesses. And there are humans that are caught up in the conflict and don't know what's going on. There are people who seem to be humans at first when we first meet them, but it turns out that they have a secret past, and that is sort of being untangled as we move through the series. And at its heart, we have three young women, and so the trilogy follows each of the women. So the first book follows Lily, and she's one of a set of triplets. And so the second book that I just read in January follows her sister Rose, and then the third book is named Tears of the Marigold. And so I assume something interesting is going to happen, because the whole premise of the first book is that Marigold has died. So things to be revealed, right? So yeah, the first book was very much the first book in a series where we were finding out sort of like dribs and drabs of what was going on through the eyes of the main character, Lily, who is very much sort of coming of age and coming into her own over the course of the novel. And so in Soul of a Rose, the second book, Lily is much more complete as a character than she was in the first book, because she's already gone through her journey. And so we do still see her as a supporting character in Soul of a Rose, and then the book is focused much more on Rose. And Rose had undergone some fairly traumatic events in the first book, and so in the second book, Rose is sort of dealing with the outcome of those traumatic events. So she has a lot of emotional struggle going on inside her that I think S.C. Huston captures pretty well, and that she's also off on sort of her own kind of coming of age and coming into her power story, in kind of a parallel to Lily's, but of course completely different things are happening with completely different characters. So yeah, these books are a lot of fun. I think they're well written, and I actually, now that I've read the second one, I actually went back and bought 2 copies of the first book to give to 2 of my friends who I think would really enjoy it. So, you know, definitely I think a book that's worth picking up if you're into fantasy, if you're into Irish mythology with a little dash of a different mythology thrown in. I hadn't spent a lot of time, actually a dash of a couple different mythologies thrown in. I don't want to be too explicit about who all's involved, because I was kind of like, whoa, you know, when different characters started being revealed. So anyway, yeah, and then there's a little bit of romance, because we are dealing with young women, and you know, that is a sort of part of the experience for many young women, is that romance is sort of part of that coming of age process. So yeah, I guess to wrap up this video, so these were 2, I guess one speculative fiction, one fantasy. I'm sort of lumping them together under fantasy. So Margaret Pinard, I'm sorry if you feel that doesn't fit your collection and I've misrepresented it. I have an overly simplistic way of thinking about genre, I think. But anyway, 2 independent fantasies that I've read recently and really enjoyed, and by people who are active on BookTube and AuthorTube. So I will link to Margaret's and Shannon's channels down below, and you can go check out all of their other amazing content. And again, I highly recommend that you check out these 2 books. They were a very fun read. All right, I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.